Alright, so as the class has already heard, I forgot to turn the tape player on for the beginning part of the lecture here, so I'm going back over the first 18 pages. Remember, we are going to be covering chapters 1 through 6 and also 8 and 12. So in this chapter you can see there's an explanation of the history of the World Wide Web, which I'm not going to go over. The differences between client-side and server-side scripting, understanding the components of a JavaScript statement, adding basic JavaScript code to web pages, and structuring your JavaScript programs. Now, JavaScript is known as the language of the web, and we are dealing with JavaScript solely in this class as being a client-side tool, not a server-side tool. All right. In this chapter, as it says in the second paragraph down, you will learn the skills required to create basic JavaScript programs. That's the idea. All right. Now, I'm just very quickly going to go over this even more than I did in the actual class that I forgot to tape. All right. The World Wide Web is around, I don't know, really technically it's close to being 50 years old, and it was basically created at first as an arm of the Defense Department so that military bases and the like could talk to one another, and then it was sort of added on so that educational institutions could talk to one another. But really about 25, 26 years ago, Tim Berners-Lee created what was called the World Wide Web, or WWW, the World Wide Web. And what he did was he wanted to have a way that you would be able to link documents together by using what were called hyperlinks. All right. Kind of an important thing here that I really didn't say in class, and a common misconception is that the words web and internet are synonymous. All right, the web is part of the internet, but it's not the entire internet. A document on the web is called a web page. It's uniquely identified using a URL, or Uniform Resource Locator. A URL is a type of URI, which is a Uniform Resource Identifier, which is a more generic type of term. All right, when you request something from your browser, that's called a Hypertext Transfer Protocol request. When the browser responds, it's known as a Hypertext Transfer Protocol response. Now, back in the 70s, 80s, I don't even know when it was, 90s, I guess early 90s, I should say, late 90s, there were browser wars that were basically between Internet Explorer and Netscape, all right, to kind of settle the problems that were having to be dealt with between these browsers. The World Wide Web Consortium, or W3C, was established in the mid-90s to oversee the development of web technology. What's happened over time is basically the way that most browsers have done things is kind of merged together, so they are following standards. Hypertext markup, also known as HTML, is what you use to mark up documents. A markup language is not a true programming language. Rather, as it says there, it's a set of characters or symbols that define the document structure. Not going to go over basic HTML syntax because we talked about that in class. We've already looked at virtually all of the things that are in this table here on the bottom of page 6 in your book. Now, JavaScript is a case-sensitive language. So even though technically with HTML it's always recommended you use lowercase, you technically don't have to. In this class we'll use undercase, lowercase for everything JavaScript, everything CSS, everything HTML. So they show you an example. In fact, if I were to go and grab the code that is shown in your book on page 8, and if I not only grab the code, but if I had the images and I ran it, it would look similar to what you see right here with this Hotel Natoma. All right. jumping all the way to the bottom of page 11 in the text. Again, this is what you're going to be working on in the chapter. You will have a starting point with this, and you will be adding stuff to it as you go on. On the bottom of page 11, I guess I went a page too far, but on the bottom of page 11, the author says here, in this chapter, you'll add JavaScript code for the web page for Tinley Xeriscapes, I don't know, a landscape company that specializes in plants that need minimal watering. So the figures that are shown on pages 12 and 13 show both the desktop view on page 12, right here, and then the laptop view, or I'm sorry, the mobile view on page 13. So you will start on page 12. You will be following all those steps that you're told to follow throughout the text. Okay? All right. Turning up to page 15, as we only have 3 or 4 more pages to go here. Introduction to web development. As it says, web page design or web design refers to the visual design and creation of documents. So I equate web design with more a marketing type of an idea where you have to understand colors and fonts and the like. This book touches on web page authoring and web page development. Authoring, as it says there, refers to creating the creation and assembly of the tags, attributes, and data that make up a page. That's pretty much what we've been doing thus far in this class with the HTML and the CSS. Now we're moving in more on the web development and web programming side, all right, where we are adding code to provide interactivity for our website. And as the author says here near the top of page 16, although JavaScript lives more in the realm of web page authoring, there is some overlap between authoring and development. Okay? All right, and the last thing that we went over, which I forgot to tape, was talking about this client-server architecture. And you look at the client as basically being the front end, or being you as you sit at your phone or at your laptop or your desktop or your tablet, your iPad, whatever it happens to be, and you key in an address into your address bar and you hit enter. You are the client making an HTTP request. That request has got to go off to a server someplace. The server will attempt to answer the request and give you back HTML in the form of an HTTP response. Now, if you are working with a two-tier type of architecture, and this is what's mentioned on page 17 in the book, with a two-tier, you basically have one or more clients that are asking information to a single server. So the server will handle everything. Data storage, answering the requests, everything that has to be done. All right? But as websites get more and more complex, the chances are you're going to have to add additional servers. So when you add additional servers, you have at least a three-tier, but typically known as a multi-tier client-server system, sometimes called an N-tier. All right. So the processing tier, the middle tier, handles the interaction between the web browser and the data storage. So in other words, when we have something similar to this, did it show a picture? I think it did in here someplace. There. So the data storage is not done on the processing tier. In other words, there's more than one server involved. That pretty much is what I had gone over, because then we went to a break, and after the break I picked it up on page 19 talking about JavaScript and client scripting. So this little 10 minutes or so was meant to cover these stuff. Now the only thing I didn't go over now, which I did go over in class, is we quickly looked at the chapter setup that's in here. So we are covering chapter 1, Introduction to JavaScript. That's what we did today. Next week on Monday, the 23rd, we will go over chapter 2, working with functions, data types, and operators. 2 weeks from now, on October 30th, we will go over chapter 3, building arrays and controlling flow. The next week, the 6th of November, we will go over chapter 4, debugging and error handling. The 13th of November, we will go over working with the document object model, DOM, and HTML. The 20th, remember that's a short week because that's the week of Thanksgiving. On Monday, we will go over enhancing and validating forms. The 27th, we will go over chapter 8. Remember, we're skipping 7, which is on manipulating data in strings and arrays. And then finally, whatever's next, the 20th or whatever that happens to be, I don't know when that is. So the 20th, the 27th, then we go over chapter 8, and the 4th of December, something like that, we will go over chapter 12, Introduction to Jquery. That should pretty much bring you up to date with everything that I missed before. Sorry, I forgot to tape.